The first one is an entitled people story. I thought I had landed my dream job when I was hired as a paralegal at a prestigious law firm in the city. As someone fresh out of law school, it was an amazing opportunity to gain experience at such a highly regarded firm. The salary and benefits were great too, allowing me to live comfortably while paying off my student loans. For the first few months, everything was perfect. I loved the fast-paced nature of the job and thrived under the high pressure. My co-workers were smart and helpful, always willing to guide me as the newbie. Even the partners and senior associates acknowledged my good work, promising growth opportunities down the line. That all changed when Karen joined the firm. Karen was a lateral hire, an attorney poached from another top firm in the city. From day one, she made sure to point out that she had graduated top of her class at an Ivy League law school and worked for major corporate clients. Karen saw herself as superior to the rest of us mere mortals. Her arrogance was palpable. She'd stride around the office in her expensive business suits, sparing no opportunity to belittle her colleagues and undermine their work. As a paralegal, I was lowest on the totem pole in Karen's eyes. She treated me like her personal servant, assigning me the most mundane tasks beneath someone of my qualifications. I bit my tongue and carried on, not wanting to cause issues as the new hire. That professional courtesy was not reciprocated by Karen. She began nitpicking my work, fabricating mistakes that didn't exist. She scolded me harshly, even in front of partners and clients, portraying me as an incompetent fool. Her constant criticism crushed my confidence. I made sure to triple-check all my work, but Karen always found ways to put me down. She'd even spread lies, claiming my mistakes cost the firm thousands in losses. Things came to a head one day when Karen barged into my cubicle, slamming a folder on my desk. "What is this sloppy work?" she yelled. "These documents are riddled with errors. I always knew you were too incompetent for this job. Don't be surprised when you get fired." As Karen continued her tirade, falsely accusing me, I noticed a partner walking by. Perfect timing. I spoke up calmly and directly. "Karen, every document I prepare goes through multiple levels of review, including by yourself in many cases. If there were errors of the magnitude you claim, they would have been caught earlier." Karen was left red-faced as the partner nodded in agreement. "Let's have a quick look, shall we?" the partner said, opening the file folder. He scanned through the documents, finding nothing amiss. With an awkward smile, Karen grasped for excuses about how she must have mixed up files in her anger over poor work produced by our team. The partner raised an eyebrow, seeing right through her lies, and told us to get back to work. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but Karen seemed determined to get me terminated. Over the next few weeks, she escalated her attacks, directly emailing the partners with inflated complaints about me. She claimed I had jeopardized cases and made outrageous mistakes that exposed the firm to malpractice lawsuits. The accusations were completely false, but I could sense the partners growing concerned. They pulled me into meetings, questioning me extensively about my work. I calmly presented evidence refuting each allegation, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. Meanwhile, Karen's mistreatment at the office continued. She vandalized my workspace when I wasn't around, ripping up case files and deleting documents from my computer to sabotage me. When I first reported it to HR, they didn't take me seriously, assuming I was making excuses for mistakes. But when it kept happening, I set up a hidden camera at my desk. Footage revealed Karen sneaking into my cubicle after hours and deliberately tampering with legal documents. HR had no choice but to start disciplinary action against her. You'd think that would make her back off. Oh, but Karen doesn't go down without a fight. She stormed into my cubicle the next morning in a rage. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "I'll make sure you never work in law again by the time I'm done with you." I told Karen to get out of my face and stop harassing me. She refused to leave, yelling louder to create a scene. That's when I discreetly turned on my phone's voice recorder and slipped it in my pocket. Karen grew more unhinged, making blatant threats about destroying my professional reputation. By the time security arrived to escort her out, I had 20 minutes of incriminating audio. Armed with video footage and the recording, I sought legal advice about suing Karen for defamation and workplace harassment. My lawyer loved the strong evidence I had gathered and agreed to take the case on contingency. We sent a demand letter to Karen, but rather than taking responsibility, she doubled down with more vicious lies to the partners. I had reached my limit. I filed a lawsuit immediately and forwarded the evidence to the State Bar Association. They promptly opened an ethics investigation into Karen based on her conduct. The law firm, desperate to avoid negative publicity, fired Karen and settled my lawsuit with a massive payout. Her career was left in shambles. The Bar Association suspended her law license for 2 years over ethics violations. She'd been exposed as an abusive bully who should never have power over others. Meanwhile, I happily started a new job at a much better firm, one where my skills are valued and I'm treated with respect. As for Karen, she can stew over how her arrogance and cruelty led to her downfall. Maybe someday she'll learn her lesson, but I'm not holding my breath. This petty revenge was sweet enough for me. The next one is a pro-revenge story. It's been 2 years, and I can finally post about this. This is juicy, so get ready. Background information. We live in an old and big manor that has been split into 3 attached houses. The houses are about 150 years old and were built around 5 huge giant sequoias, which were about 200 years old. In the UK, giant sequoias are very rare, and the 2 in our garden up the house price by about £60,000. We live next to 2 really nice neighbors, 1 young couple and 1 old couple. The story. Unfortunately, our old neighbors passed away, so their child and her family moved in. Let's call her Jo. Jo was instantly a pain in the ass. We had been sharing chickens with the previous neighbors, and Jo agreed to keep sharing them. However, on her nights, she would constantly forget to put them away, so we would have to check them every night anyway. One night, her little brats thought it would be funny to open our personal duck pen in the night, which leads to a mass slaughter. Later, the chickens went the same way. About 2 years ago, there was a storm, and one of her sequoias somehow fell over and died. They were distraught, understandably, but from then on, the jealousy started. She would constantly complain about how lucky we were to have 2 sequoias in our garden, and how our sequoia was making too much shade in their garden. It wasn't. Anyway, we just thought it was Jo being a pain. There were a few dry threats, like they will chop it down, or maybe the next storm will blow it down, until we came back from a holiday to France to find a huge 6-meter stump and nothing else. I mean, how the duck do you get rid of a 100th tree in like 2 weeks? 2 of our old British oak trees had been crushed as well. My mom and sisters were crying my dad were red in the face, and we had no evidence Jo had done it. She claimed that there had been a storm, and she had to get rid of it. We had a security camera at the front of the house, but you can get in the back if you go through a few fields. We then were given an £8,000 bill for damages to her property, and to have the tree chopped up and remove the wood alone would have been worth a small fortune. We had lost all hope, and 2 weeks had passed when my dad came running in from the garden. We had put up a wildlife camera a few months ago and had caught everything. We got a lawyer on the phone and started our revenge. We got a tree surgeon out who said it was an original specimen brought into the UK in 1860, along with the 2 that were in Elveston Castle Country Park. There were 218 around the UK, but only 60 now. He also told us to call out an engineer because the roots might be in the foundation, so when they rot, it could damage the house. Turns out we would need to redo the foundations. Then we took Jo to court and sued them for damage to property, trespassing, and lots of other smaller claims. The tree would cost $250K to have another sequoia that was 200 years put in and looked after. It's basically impossible. Plus the damage to the foundation, which was $200K, and the 2 oaks, which were another $25K. So with the smaller claims, it went to about £500,000, $700,000. They had to move out. And we have now paid off the mortgage, done a lovely loft and kitchen conversion, and have basically done up the house and garden, as well as plant a 60-year-old sequoia tree in the back garden. We also had our kitchen counter and table made from the old sequoia. We now have a new lovely family living next to us who we share chickens, ducks, and pygmy goats with. They're very nice, and I make a fortune babysitting their kids. The next one is a petty revenge story. On a property with a beautiful lawn, and it came with side garden running along the fence bordering the sidewalk, full of herbs like mint, lavender, and oregano, some small carrots, and other stuff. I quickly learned that several older ladies in the neighborhood felt entitled to my garden. They were reaching through the fence posts up to their shoulders, going as far as their arm could reach, grabbing what they could and fill their plastic bags. They would wait till someone was out of the house or early in the morning to make their grab and run, so they were well aware they were in the wrong. Just knowing they were doing this whenever we were out of the house made my skin crawl, so I ripped out the garden. Less work for me now. It honestly became too much work and messy to have, but it wasn't a big deal, and there was plenty of it to go around. I hate gardening, so it was a relief to get rid of. I also didn't like that the garden had become an invitation for thieving grannies to intrude on my property. I was planning on removing the garden eventually, but was not in a rush and didn't care enough. They just accelerated my plans to get rid of it all by fueling me with spite. The next one is a malicious compliance story. So I make a living doing landscape maintenance, mostly for commercial properties and wealthy homeowners. Unsurprisingly, the wealthy homeowners tend to be the most difficult customers. I could probably write a book with the amount of ridiculous requests I receive. I added a new customer, Karen, real name, to my weekly route recently, and the first visit to her home was yesterday. Using Google Maps, I bid the property for 1 hour of work. When I showed up, the place was a mess. It hadn't been serviced in months. I spent 2 hours making this place look about as perfect as it could. I cleaned up 2 half-dead palm trees, trimmed all the bushes, mowed, edged, string trimmed, and cleaned up all the leaves I was able to. An hour later, Karen calls my company, me, to complain about the work done. Apparently, they blew leaves into the corner of her property and left them. Well, that's complete bullcrap. But okay, I'll entertain the nonsense. The leaves in question were already in the back corner of the property, embedded in the pine straw, as they'd been there for quite a while. Standard practice is blowing out any loose leaves from garden beds and mulching or bagging them, which had been done. Karen didn't really want to hear reason when I tried to explain this and insisted I send someone out to get the remaining leaves. I went back and got every leaf off of her property, including over 75% of the pine straw. Of course, she called again to complain about her missing pine straw, at which point I reiterated the same thing I told her before. I let her know I'd be happy to replace the pine straw for $400. I haven't heard back yet. The next one is an entitled people story. Now on to my situation. I would not describe the full story here, but if someone wants it, I might post it as an update. Basically, I, M14, have to deal with a very toxic friend, M16, every day. We met in 2020. Things were well, but in retrospect, he was making fun of me from the very first conversation we had. 2 years later, we both went to a summer camp for 2 weeks where he showed his true colors and made my life hell, and almost all 100 kids there, even though we were split into 4 groups, complained about him. Also, since then, we argue over every smallest thing imaginable. For example, recently, I sent him a post about yellow paint in video games, and he blew up, being mean to me, saying literally nobody cared, based on him not hearing about any of it, then saying that this is stupid, and later counting this as another epic win on me after providing 0 proof but remembering to call every message stupid. He turned "I'm just right" into a meme of some sort, but that is just how he acts all the time, seriously. Recently, I shared with him some negative comments about our mutual friend, which resulted in me calming her down for 2 hours in the middle of the night, and all he asked was, "What do I have to be sorry about?" Later, he also falsely said to her that I showed him all our texting, something she requested to do, and showed his message to me. I just asked why he would say that, to which he just laughed and said to the girl that fine, maybe not all of our texting. As a result, she hasn't texted me since that day. I've tried cutting him out about 15 plus times at this point, but earlier when we were meeting in real life, I introduced him to my cousin, and ever since, said cousin refuses to acknowledge that I don't want to talk to my friend, and puts us back in contact, unpreventable. Cutting my cousin out isn't really possible either. We are close and meet each other every weekend. I'm just really getting affected mentally because of being constantly picked on. If you want the full story, specific times he was outright a jerk, tell me in the comments. The next one is an entitled parent story. This all happened around 10 years ago and takes place over the course of the absolute worst months of my life. I had just turned 18 at the time, and thanks to my mom's gambling addiction, we lost the house that I had lived in my entire life. Almost right after we lost the house, a family friend offered to let us stay at her house with her family, since her and her husband had a few extra rooms. We move into their very large house, and at first things were great. The family consisted of the EPs and their EK, who was the same age as me. All of them were understanding and nice at first, offering to let me and my mom stay for as long as it would take for us to get back on our feet. EM even got me my first job working as a volunteer at a bingo hall. It was all under the table kind of money, but I didn't care since it was money in my pocket that my mom wouldn't provide me. EPs had been family friends for a very long time, and are absolutely enamored with the idea of me and EK getting together, and have been ever since we were little. They constantly made comments like, "Look at the beautiful couple. You two look so great together," or "We'll give you lovebirds some privacy," whenever we were in the same place together. Despite me stating several times that I didn't like him in that way, they were determined to try to get us to work, like some kind of arranged marriage. I think that really fed into EK's ego, because about a month into my stay, there is when the first incident happened. We were walking down the hall when he smacks my ass from out of nowhere. I really freaked out and went off on him, yelling, cursing, and giving him a few shoves. Our parents came upstairs to see what all the yelling was about, and we end up getting separated. I tell my mom what happened, and she responds by telling me it wasn't a big deal, and to not rock the boat while we were living there. EK eventually gives some half-assed apology to me at dinner, and his dad made some joke about how he's relieved that he's finally taking an interest in girls, since they were starting to think he was gay. Things proceeded to escalate from there. Any chance EK got, he would make lewd comments or find some way to grope me. Every time I went to his parents, it was always hand-waved away as boys will be boys, or he probably didn't mean it that way, that he was a really sweet guy deep down and I should get to know him better. On one occasion, ED told me that I should be flattered. My mom was content to not do anything, enjoying the freeloading that got to feed her addiction too much, and telling me to stop playing hard to get. One day, EK puts a hand down my shirt as I'm sitting on the couch, and I started yelling at him about how I'm sick of him doing stuff like this, and to never do it again. But he gave me the most terrifying glare and told me, "Shut up, you live in my house." After that, I was so terrified of being alone with him that I would stay after school for as long as I could until Elle was asked to leave. And if I ever had to go back to the house for any reason, I would just hide in my room with the door locked and wouldn't come out until I knew other people were around, since I didn't know if one day he was just going to force himself on me. Fast forward a few months and I'm told, not asked, that I'm going with EK as his date to his senior prom, which is in a week. EPs are super excited and tell me that we'll have the whole house to ourselves that night after we come back from the dance. I very quickly shut that down and tell them that I'm not going because of how EK treats me, and EPs spend the rest of the day doing everything they can to compel me. First, they try telling me money isn't an issue, how they'll pay for my dress and ticket. When that doesn't work, they try to guilt trip me, telling me how they ask me for so little, and how this is the least I can do, and how much EK would love it. Finally, my mom eventually hears about it after she comes home from the casino, and she's pissed. She tells me how I need to go, how it's such a big opportunity for the both of us, and how I need to tell the EPs that I changed my mind. I refuse, and the day after EK's prom is over, EPs sit me and my mom down for a talk. They start implementing new rules about how they now expect us to pitch in for all the amenities, how we're expected to buy our own food, and how they're going to start charging us for rent. Before all this, they were very adamant about us not paying for anything, wanting us to save money to get back on our feet. Even without my mom spending half or all of her checks at the casino, there was no way for us to afford what they were asking, and they subsequently gave us a month to find our own place and move out. We ended up moving out to live in a sketchy neighborhood with some guy my mom was dating, whom she'd met at the casino. My mom blamed me for the entire thing, saying I blew a golden opportunity for both of us. How I basically threw away a great future that was all laid out for me because I wouldn't dance and put out. That cut me pretty deeply, and I still get angry thinking about it to this day. A few months later I graduated, but my mom didn't show up to the ceremony. I come back to the house and all my stuff is sitting on the curb next to the trash and had been thoroughly picked through. I found out my key doesn't work anymore and nobody is picking up their phone. End up waiting till about 3 in the morning for them to come back from the casino, and my mom tells me in so many words that I'm my own now. Nothing I say changes her mind, and I eventually pack what little of my stuff is left into my car. I spent the next month or two couch surfing or sleeping in my car while trying to pick up as many days as I could at work. Eventually, I managed to save up enough to move into my first apartment with a roommate. I haven't spoken to my mom or the EPs since then, but recently my mom left me a voicemail asking if we could talk, since she didn't like the way we left things. Since then, she's been blowing up my phone every day. I don't plan on ever taking her call. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.